There are many things in this life that can be overwhelming. It can be things that are just perceived to us, anxieties, fears, concerns, or real things that are present in our lives. And so, how do we deal with the feeling of being overwhelmed? One of the most fascinating passages to me is in Jonah chapter 2, when Jonah finds himself in the depths of the sea. And so, we'll read about this and talk about how it relates to the feeling of being overwhelmed. The chapter starts out by saying, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the stomach of the fish. And he said, I called out of my distress to the Lord, and he answered me. I called for help from the depth of Sheol." And Sheol is known as the underworld, as this dark place of no return after death that one would go and experience the darkness and absence of light and life. So this is where Jonah finds himself, in the stomach of the fish, in a dark underworld place in the sea. He says, "You heard my voice, you threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas." And we have to remember, in the context of the book of Jonah, that Jonah was running from God and running from the calling that God had on Jonah's life. And so Jonah finds himself in this darkness for a reason. The Lord ultimately had chosen Jonah for his purpose, and he knew Jonah's stubbornness. He knew Jonah's rebellion. Jonah had gone the opposite direction from where God had wanted him to go and called him to go. And so because of this, the Lord brought about the circumstances that caused Jonah to be overwhelmed, to be cast into the sea, to experience this darkness and this underworld that he found himself in. And so, of course, Jonah in all of this is completely overwhelmed because he was trying to get away from God. Yet in all of this is the notion that in being overwhelmed, Jonah in the end had to draw near to God, as we'll see. So he says, "For you threw me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the current flowed around me. All your breakers and waves passed over me." And again, in life, this can be the same feeling that we receive and have as well, as it seems at times that everything that can take place will overwhelm us. All the breakers and waves pass over our head, crashing around us. The confusion, the sound, the fury of life, and chaos all around us. And again, this is something that can be brought about because of the Lord's will, because he loves us, and because he wants us to have strength in him. When I rebel against God and his calling in my life, things will often become more chaotic. And because of that, I go to a place where I need to find peace, which is only truly with God, not just tranquility, but stability as well. Jonah continues, "So I said, I have been cast out of your sight. Nevertheless, I will look again toward your holy temple." And this is the truth of hope that Jonah had. And we all need this in times when we feel overwhelmed, when the breakers and waves are passing over top of us, when we find ourselves in darkness, sinking, or overwhelmed. We need to remember that if you are born again, if you are in Christ, that God will bring you up from the depths, that it will pass, whatever the overwhelming thing that is in your life that's causing you distress. Jonah says in verse 5, "Water encompassed me to the point of death. The deep flowed around me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head." We can only imagine what it was like to be inside this whale or this fish as it's described here in chapter 2 of Jonah. The conditions were not good, and so this is relayed by the sense that the seaweed being wrapped around his head is the state that he's in. "I descended to the base of the mountains. The earth with its bars was around me forever. But you have brought up my life from the pit, Lord my God." And as we read Jonah chapter 2, we begin to see a sense of there's more conveyed here than just the narrative of Jonah and the account of him going into this whale or fish and being brought back after 3 days. There's much more here in terms of our salvation. God is a God of salvation. That's for our eternal salvation for our souls, but also on a daily basis, He saves us. After you are born again, your salvation begins daily. After that, it's continued until the time you're brought into His kingdom eternally in heaven. So each day I experience salvation. He saves me from sin and destruction and hell, but also on a smaller scale, each day He saves me from my own poor choices, from my own lack of wisdom, from my own foolishness, from circumstances in my life that I couldn't escape on my own. These things are what He saves me from on a daily basis. So again, like Jonah, even in the point of darkness and depth, of being in the underworld, we need to remember and have this confidence, a confidence that is sureness of God's salvation, continuing to work in me and around me. Because my confidence is in God who created all things and allowed me to be in the stomach of this great whale, this fish that I might find myself in when I feel overwhelmed in this life. I need to keep my mind set on the things above, even when the seaweed and all of the other tendrils of life are wrapping themselves around me and dragging me down. That's when our faith is tested. That's when our hope becomes evident. That's when our knowledge of who God is and His promises keep us afloat. So again, in verse 6, he says, I descended to the base of the mountains. The earth with its bars was around me forever, but you have brought up my life from the pit. And remember that we're never out of the sight of God. Psalm 139 says this from verse 7 to 12, Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, or the underworld, behold, you are there. If I take up the wings of dawn, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will take hold of me. If I say, surely the darkness will overwhelm me, and the light around me will be night, even darkness is not dark to you, and the night is as bright as the day. Darkness and light are alike to you. So wherever we are, no matter how overwhelming it might be, how dark, how hopeless, our hope in Christ and our hope in God can never fade. And in all these things, we need to be able to cry out like Jonah and say, nevertheless, I will look again toward your holy temple. We don't know when a particular trial may end, when circumstances may improve for us, or when things may stabilize. But as we sink down even to the depths of the sea, we know that He is with us and that He will never leave us nor forsake us. I'll finish by reading the last few verses of Jonah 2. While I was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you, into your holy temple. Those who are followers of worthless idols abandon their faithfulness. But I will sacrifice to you with a voice of thanksgiving. That which I have vowed, I will pay. Salvation is from the Lord. Let's keep this gratitude and hope with us always, no matter how overwhelming life may get. Take care.